Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are participating in the world. My name is Josephine Argo Rasmussen, and I'm the project manager at the Korea Center at the Institute for Security and Development Policy in Stockholm, Sweden. Today, I'm very excited to welcome you to a webinar that will look into the LGBTQ plus situation in South Korea and learning opportunities from Taiwan. We have this pleasure of co-hosting this event with McCall Consulting Group, but also with the Korea Foundation's generous support. Before I start, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. So first, today we have a keynote speak from Jae Sun from McCall Consulting. We have Ho-Rim Yim from South Korea and Joyce Teng from Taiwan. So good afternoon to you guys. First, a little bit about our speakers. So Ho-Rim Yi is the co-executive director of Rainbow Action Korea and the executive director of Marriage for All Korea, where she advances marriage equality through legislation and advocacy. She holds a doctorate in public health. Next, we have the pleasure of having Joyce Teng, who is a board member of the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Association for Asia. She has a Master of Laws from National Taiwan University and experience as a formal legislative assistant, and she played a key role in lobbying for the passage of Taiwan's same-sex marriage. Finally, we have Jae Sung, who is a senior associate at McCall Consulting Group. She advises on public affairs and advocacy in Korea, and she previously served as a program officer at the Asian Korea Center. I will now hand the word over to our keynote speaker, Jae Sun. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for the intro, Josephine. Hi, everyone. My name is Jae Sun. I'm a senior associate from McCall Consulting Group. We are a public affairs and strategic communications consultancy based in Seoul. I must admit, I'm happy and a little bit anxious to be here. Talking openly about LGBTQ plus rights in Korea isn't necessarily considered a casual dinner conversation. In fact, when I briefed our leadership of this opportunity, they were slightly concerned of any personal backlash. Little do they know, I secretly enjoy the attention. Jokes aside, I'm very honored to be part of this opening and welcoming space to discuss an important issue. I want to start by noting the timing of this conversation. So this Saturday, we're going to have tens of thousands of people marching through Central Seoul for its annual queer parade. It's the centerpiece of the Seoul Queer Culture Festival, now in its 27th year. The festival's history tells part of the story. The first march in 2000 drew about 50 people, and today it draws upward of 150,000. And you can trace the movement's evolution in its slogan. Previously, it was "There's no later, demand change now." And this year in 2026, it reads "Intersection, turning difference into connection." And that is signal of a movement that has matured from demanding to be seen toward seeking common ground. But that ground remains contested. For the past few years, Seoul City, has declined the request to use Seoul Plaza, so the parade now moves through other parts of the city. And I raise this because it frames why we're here. The question of LGBTQ plus rights in Korea is often treated as a matter for one community. But it's also, a measure of something broader. Korea is, by almost any metric, an advanced democracy. It's a member of the OECD. It's a global cultural powerhouse. It's an economy in the world's top tier. And yet, on legal protection for its queer community, it remains one of the few advanced democracies without a comprehensive anti-discrimination law. And the gap between Korea's global standing and the protection it extends at home is really a question about democratic maturity, whether equality before the law applies evenly or selectively. I believe McCall's role today on this panel is a specific one. We're not here to give an in-depth assessment of the state of rights. We have our two experts from Korea and Taiwan who have far more authority and have been at the front lines of this movement to tell that story. So what I'm hoping for today is to frame why this topic matters, provide a short read of Korea's political machinery, and why Taiwan's experience may hold real value for Korea. So to begin, it's worth appreciating how much Korea and Taiwan share. Both are advanced democracies that emerge from authoritarian rule within living memory. Both rest on deep Confucian cultural foundations. Both have powerful, organized, conservative constituencies as well. And yet on this specific issue, they've arrived at different places. Taiwan legalized same-sex marriage in 2019. It added full joint adoption rights in 2023. And while neither country has a single consolidated anti-discrimination act, Taiwan prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation through enforceable sectoral laws in employment and education. On the other hand, Korea's protections are a bit thinner than they first appear. Its Human Rights Commission Act does list sexual orientation as a prohibited ground, but without real enforcement. And the enforceable sectoral laws in employment, for instance, they don't cover sexual orientation or gender identity. And that's not to say Korea is standing still. The movement has come at the margins and through the courts. In 2024, the Supreme Court ruled for the first time that a same-sex partner was entitled to spousal coverage under the National Health Insurance System. It was a very important ruling. In 2025, just last year, the government began allowing same-sex partners to identify as such on certain household records. And the interesting question is, we have these two societies very alike in their histories and their pressures. Why has one built a national framework while the other has not? And I'd like to suggest the answer lies less in culture than in politics and institutions. And the most instructive place to look for, of course, is Taiwan itself. I mean, it's a close neighbor that has already traveled this road, and the way it got there is more instructive than the destination itself. So in 2017, we've observed Taiwan's constitutional court ruling that denying marriage to same-sex couples was unconstitutional, and this gave the legislature a deadline of 2 years, which they adhered to. So for lawmakers, it was no longer, should we do this, but on what terms and by when. And of course, I want to point out the process was neither smooth nor consensual. We had referendums in between, rejecting marriage equality by a wide margin. So by any plain reading, the public did say no, and yet, shortly after, the legislature passed marriage equality anyway, adhering to the court's deadline. And I want to be careful here, that referendum in some ways was a defeat, and this law was a hard-won victory for the movement. So if we look at Korea until to this day, its go-to argument for delaying this issue is always, the Korean society is not yet ready. It needs further social discourse. And I believe Taiwan's experience suggests that, the relationship may run the other way, that law can move first and consensus can follow. So bringing this back to Korea and, and why this timing is worth your attention. So as of yet, there's no bill for same-sex marriage in Korea. There are, of course, live bills before the National Assembly for a comprehensive anti-discrimination law and for life partnership. And notably, a member of the governing party, the Democratic Party of Korea, is co-sponsoring the anti-discrimination effort. So we believe this signals movement from within the majority. And the structural conditions around those bills are right now unusually favorable. The presidency, a majority in the National Assembly, most regional governments sit within the same political bloc, and President Lee holds a relatively strong public mandate. So in a system where divided government has so often been the obstacle, this kind of alignment is rare. So in many ways, it can be a question of political will, whether this governing party chooses to use this window while it has it. Of course, I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture for this movement. The public resistance and the roadblocks are real. And I think I can leave Horim to describe the texture and intricacies of the matter. But from a purely strategic standpoint, this is an opening worth recognizing for what it is. And I believe if Taiwan's lesson is that an institution sometimes has to move first, Korea's own history says something similar. Like reform here has often arrived not through gradual consensus, but at the moment, the cost of inaction became impossible to ignore. Think of the workplace safety laws that passed only after repeated tragedy made this delay indefensible. So change tends to wait for the forcing moment. And I think the pattern that strikes me most is Korea has never been slow to change. Its politics has just been slow to notice. And for once we're seeing the conditions are aligned, all that's missing is the nerve. This is my keynote. Thank you, everyone. I pass this to you now, Josephine.
Thank you so much, Aung, for setting the stage. I think our two speakers have been nodding a lot alongside your keynote speak, so I think they're very excited to delve deeper into the examples of South Korea and Taiwan. So let's go to Hudem Yi first and get the Taiwanese, like the Korean perspective. I mean, thank you so much.
Thank you, Josephine, and thank you for having me today. I'm gonna share my slide here. Um, and happy Pride Month, everyone. So today I will talk about more than 30 years of LGBTQ activism in South Korea, where it began and why legal change has been so difficult, and how our movement is trying to create changes through the marriage equality campaign. So let me begin with the early history. So why do I describe this as a movement with more than 30 years of history? So the emergence of LGBTQ activism in Korea is closely connected to Korea's democratization. After Japanese colonial rule, the Korean War, and the decades of authoritarian rule, many Korean social movements focused on ending military dictatorship and building democracy. After the June democratic struggle in 1987, civil society began to diversify, and LGBTQ people also began to ask if democracy is about human dignity and equality, where are we in that democracy? So in the 1990s, LGBTQ student groups formed on university campus, and maybe some of you may remember the blue screened online message board. So those early online spaces were also important because many LGBTQ people could not be open to their family, schools, or workplace. And as Jiang mentioned, the first Seoul Queer Culture Festival was held in 2000. So in the 1990s and early 2000s were a period of emergence for us. Small and fragile, but very important. However, visibility did not automatically lead to legal change. So today, the legal and policy landscape for LGBTQ people in Korea is still very limited. Korea does not have a general sodomy law, but consensual same-sex sexual acts between soldiers are still punishable under the Military Criminal Act. And the National Human Rights Commission Act includes sexual orientation as a protected ground, and the Commission has interpreted gender equality as also protected, but Korea still does not have a comprehensive anti-discrimination law. Same-sex marriage and civil partnership are not legally recognized, and legal gender recognition is still governed by strict court guidelines. And transgender people are required to meet very invasive and inhumane conditions, including surgery and sterilization. And in government policy, LGBTQ people are often treated as if we do not exist in this society. There is almost no official SOGI data collection, so health education, housing, employment, and family policies rarely reflect our lives. So why change has been so slow? One important reason is organized evangelical politics. A turning point was the anti-discrimination bill controversy in 2027, when the Ministry of Justice announced a draft anti-discrimination bill. The conservative Christian groups attacked it as a bill that would promote homosexuality. And as a result, sexual orientation and 7 other protected grounds were removed from the draft. Since then, similar attacks has been repeated again and again. So every time a comprehensive anti-discrimination law is proposed, it faces same pattern of organized opposition. They lobby lawmakers, they pressure local governments, they organize protests. And sometimes they even try to physically block the pride event. This opposition is also not only domestic. Korean conservative Christian groups are also connected to global anti-gender and evangelical networks. For example, just last year in 2025, the US conservative activist Charlie Kirk, just 2 weeks before he was murdered, his last international trip was to Korea for a far-right Christian convention called Build Up Korea, which was modeled on Turning Point USA. And evangelical politics is not only about direct opposition. It has also created a political environment where many liberal politicians avoid LGBTQ issues by saying, I support equality, but not now. This is what I call the politics of later. And these politicians often say, I am against all forms of discrimination, but now is not the right time for LGBTQ issues. These statements may sound moderate, but in practice, this keep LGBTQ agenda outside of the main political agenda. For example, since the backlash against anti-discrimination bill in 2007, the bill has been introduced to the National Assembly several times over the past 18 years, but every attempt has failed without political will of liberal politicians, including the Democratic Party, which is now our ruling party. And after years of this political deadlock, our movement began asking, how can we create a breakthrough? So the Marriage for All Korea campaign, which we launched in 2023, was our answer to that question. Our strategy has two main parts. First, we build broader public support for marriage equality so that lawmakers feel greater pressure to act. Second, we use strategic litigation to seek changes through the court, especially when the legislators continue to avoid LGBTQ rights. I'm going to briefly talk about the strategic litigation. In Korea, we have an independent constitutional court. So from the beginning of the campaign, we saw constitutional litigation as a main pathway to achieving marriage equality. In October 2024, we filed a marriage equality lawsuit with 11 plaintiff couples whose marriage legislation has been rejected. The lawsuit has two main parts. The first one is challenging the administrative rejection, and the second part is asking the court to refer the case to the Constitutional Court, arguing that the current civil code is unconstitutional because it excludes same-sex couples from marriage. As of June 2026, 9 out of 11 initial cases has been dismissed by lower courts. So we have directly filed constitutional complaints now pending before the Constitutional Court. And in April this year, we also filed 3 additional lawsuits in Busan, Daegu, and Ulsan, partly to continue seek a court referral and partly to expand LGBTQ visibility beyond Seoul, the capital. And starting tomorrow, hearing for these regional cases will take place over the next 3 weeks. So it's especially busy Pride Month for me and our colleagues this year. And while this campaign is still ongoing, we have already been created momentum along the way. One important example is the national health insurance case. In July 2024, Korea's Supreme Court ruled that a same-sex partner should be recognized as a dependent under the national health insurance system. This was not marriage equality, but it was the first time Korea's highest court recognized that a same-sex couple could be treated as a family relationship in law. And this gave us hope that the exclusion of same-sex couples from marriage could begin to change. And we are already seeing its impact. So just last week, a court cited this decision in an infidelity-related civil damage case involving a same-sex couple. This court did not recognize same-sex marriage or de facto marriage itself, but it said that a same-sex couple who had built a shared life together should receive legal protection as a life community similar to a de facto marriage. And in 2025 population and housing census, same-sex couple could identify their relationship as spouses or cohabiting partners for the first time. Again, this is not legal recognition of marriage, but it is still very important because the state began to count us as we actually live instead of making our relationship invisible. These changes also show that the campaign is not only about waiting for one final court decision, it is also about shifting institution, public debate, and how Korean society understands LGBTQ families. And the other core part of our strategy is public campaigning. For many years, the conservative groups have portrayed LGBTQ people as a threat to children, family, or society. Our response was showing our actual lives. We share stories of same-sex couples who love, care for one another, and build community. Through the campaign video or advertisement, interviews, and magazine features, we show that our demand is not abstract. And it is about real family and real lives. We try to speak to ordinary Korean people through care, commitment, mutual respect, and love. And while this campaign was unfolding, South Korea went through a major crisis of democracy. In December 2024, the former president declared martial law. People protested, the president was impeached, and a new government came into power. Even now, 1 year after the new government took office, Korean society is still shaped by the aftermath of this crisis. On the one hand, there are new openings. During the impeachment protests, LGBTQ people became more visible, demanding a more inclusive democracy. And the new liberal government and a potentially more progressive judiciary may also create a better environment for LGBTQ rights advocacy. On the other hand, the challenges are also serious. Far-right politics and anti-gender movement are rising globally, and Korea is also a part of this trend. And we are also seeing growing conservatism among some young people in their 20s and 30s, especially around feminism and LGBTQ issues. So we still have a long way to go. But I believe that even in the face of powerful opposition, our thriving community and persistent movement will achieve equality eventually. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodin, for letting us deeper into South Korea and the current situation of LGBTQ+. Now let's go over to you, Joyce, and get the perspective from Taiwan before we have our discussion.
Okay. So thank you everyone to having me. I'm Joyce Han from Taiwan. So now I want to share a little bit about our previous experience, and because of me, I only my participation is mainly for marriage equality campaign, so I will share more about this. But I want to echo first for my colleagues, Holim shared marriage equality campaign as a choice, or it's a stage that within a very long history from LGBT movement that's also in Taiwan. And I want to also echo to Jiayong about the similarity between Taiwan and Korea actually really happened from a historical review. We can also resonate to that. So, for example, Holly mentioned about the 1990s, the LGBT movement rise. That's also quite similar in Taiwan. So, for example, in Taiwan, 2000, early 2000 and late 1990s, we can see lots of the human rights violation, LGBTI people being arrested by the police during one night there within the gay hotspot. gay hotspot, there will be 40 to 50 people being arrested by the police during one night. And then the LGBTI community gathered together to fight back. And also, from the media, we can see LGBTI people being stigmatized with drugs, HIV, and also like party, and those kind of things also make LGBTI community gather together to fight back. So we can also see similar time, early 2000, 2003. That's Taiwan's first Pride Parade. During that time, actually, those organizers did prepare masks for those participants because lots of them didn't came out in their daily life. But eventually, there are about thousands of people come to the Pride Parade. They show their face and choose to walk into the crowd as who they are. And especially, I know for example, in Japan and South Korea, the Pride Parade usually happen in Pride Month, June, but it would be too hot in Taiwan. So in Taiwan, the Pride Month would be October. So welcome every one of you come to Taiwan in the end of the final Saturday of October will be Taiwan's Pride Parade, Taipei's Pride Parade. Yeah. And from this timeline, I want to also resonate to what the previous speakers mentioned. Taiwan also had martial law, and after martial law, or during the late before martial law lifted, that's a period of civil society rise, and also with all the other civil society, LGBTI movement also rise that time. And from the blue line, you can see that's some of the milestone we achieved. For example, in 2004, that's Taiwan passed the Gender Equity Education Act. That's also because of one tragedy incident happened to a junior high school boy who died because of his gender expression, and he only can go to the toilets during the class. Otherwise, he will be bullied when class dismissed. Yeah, he died in the school, and that incident also um, make the lawmaker have the pressure to pass the Gender Equity Education Act. And that also relate to the whole generation because from 2004, every student in Taiwan, every semester, they need to take at least 2 hour gender equality education courses. It might be like men and women equal, but that also include LGBTI recognition. You need to respect, and there are LGBTI community in this world. So, and I think that also open the next generation of supporting LGBTI or gender issue. And you can see from 2006, that's the first census bill being introduced in the parliament, but it wasn't being discussed at that time. And then we have another intense wave from 2016 to 2019. And also, indeed, I think that's a very intense period of time. And so from 2016, that's the bill proposed to the parliament, and different opinion fight against each other. The society became very split, and that's the scene of Taiwan LGBTI people, and also gender-friendly community stand out for civil code amendment for census marriage. And then it comes to the Supreme Court make the interpretation for uh, census for marriage. And it comes to like Jayon just mentioned, it comes to the 2018 the referendum launched by opposition, and I think that's the first time we learned how to use a political campaign ways to do LGBTI campaign. So we have advertisement, we bought the advertisement on bus, on the newspaper, and we used lots of different ways. We also will have a very traditional rally before the voting day. The previous weekend, that would be a golden weekend for election campaign. And then we also have our volunteer to stand in between the night market, the morning market, to give the flyers to strangers to talk about how you should vote. I think that's the political time for LGBTI issue being brought, and also a political time for our community to really step into a political field. And then it comes to the 2019. I think that's, for me, that's the first time I experienced a very systematically political persuasion campaign. We calculate the votes from the parliamentarian, and we separate them between different group and trying to persuade them. And I also want to point out one thing. In Taiwan, we don't have, not like South Korea, we don't have that high population of Christian. That's one thing, but we still have very strong opposition on LGBTI issue, because that's rooting into the conservative family value, which affect our political field a lot. And another thing, like in 2019, why eventually there is a break point, the law being passed. According to our previous president, Tsai Ing-wen, she mentioned when she stepped down, she said her government can eventually did this because of the young generation. That's the whole young generation make her to do that. And another thing, she especially recently mentioned about the previous former Premier Su, and he represent the first generation fought the authoritarian. He was the lawyer defending the political victims, and he chose to have a very soft speak to those parliamentarian and tell them it's the historical moment for the ruling party at that time. They need to have the expression when they, at the like 30 or 50 years ago, they choose to fight back from the martial law time, and now it's the time they need to do the decision for the history of Taiwan. And I think that's the speech, the generational speech within the political field have this result come after. And in the final few moments, I want to share about the scene afterwards. So my previous organization, Taiwan Equality Campaign, they will do social attitude survey every year. And from 2020, that the 1 year anniversary after the same-sex marriage bill been passed, and then until now. So I pick up several highlight questions. The first is about same-sex marriage. So the supporting rate after 1 year we pass same-sex marriage law, actually the oppose is higher. So you can see that's 48 versus 41. But now we can see the number comes to the supporting rate is 54 versus 35. So that's a rise of 15%. And here comes to another question we will ask about people kissing on the street. So we ask about heterosexual couple, lesbian couple, and gay couple. And you can see from the next year, so 2022, we can see the supporting rate for lesbian, and the supporting rate in 2021 is extremely low. That's also from our previous analyze. It's also because of the pandemic. So that's why it comes to so low. And you can see the number actually stay around 60% of supporting rate for lesbian couples kids on the street. But there was a drop in 2005. And that's a similar drop in every questions. So here we comes to another question about that's the most controversial question. So when you ask people, would you support marriage equality? They probably will say yes, but would you would you accept your own kids to be LGBTI? That number comes to like from 49, and now it comes to 59. So it also rises about 10%. And you also see the slight drop in 2025. And then the final question I want to highlight is the acceptance for candidate for politicians. So people tend to support or can accept a politician to be LGBTI. From 2021, that was 64, and now it's 68. And also we saw a slight drop in 2025. And from those numbers, actually, I will say we will generally have more people to recognize or support LGBTI after the law being passed, because LGBTI being together, it's been normalized. It's our daily life. And for the slightly drop in 2025, I believe it's been impacted by the global situation about conservative been raised, and Trump administration have a restrict policy on LGBTI issues or gender issues. And we also been impacted by that. But if we do have the resilience of civil society, we can still keep the momentum for us. And so I want to conclude my part by this scene. This is Nymphia Wynn, which is a RuPaul Drag Race winner. After she won RuPaul Drag Race, our president, you can see the hat below. That's our previous president. Invite her to present her performance in the presidential hall. And Tsai Ing-wen she went to many university for speech recently because of the graduation season. And this sentence is what she shared to those students. She said, politics is not a power game distant from us. Rather, it's a collective effort by each and every one of us deciding how to make our society better. And I think that's also what I learned from the previous campaign, or what I seen within Taiwan's campaign. If we step into the politics and we been part of the campaign, we can make difference. Thank you.
Thank you. It was such a powerful quote at the end, Joyce. I think what became very apparent is that despite Taiwan having made a lot of efforts in improving the rights of its LGBTQ plus people, there's still a lot to be learned. And for South Korea, there's a lot to be learned from Taiwan. But also a lot of cooperation opportunities, because maybe some of the same issues still persist. So before we go into the Q&A, let's have a small discussions. And for all of our audience, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and I will make sure to have time for that. But first, I have the honor of the moderator of asking some questions for our speakers to discuss. What I think is very interesting is that it was pointed out how important legislation have been both in the case of South Korea and Taiwan in improving the rights of LGBTQ plus people, but neither have an anti-discrimination law. So efforts have been done to promote, especially in Taiwan, as I understand it, with the introduction of special law to give rights to LGBTQ plus couple, including marriage. So right now, Taiwan have improved its context of its LGBTQ plus community, but still want the anti-discrimination law. For this case of South Korea, does South Korea both need an anti-discrimination law or special law like in the case of Taiwan, or is an anti-discrimination law enough? Or from the legislation side, what would your perspective be to increase the rights of people in both Taiwan but also in South Korea? I don't know who would like to begin with that one, a big one.
Maybe I can start.
Yep.
Because Holly mentioned about anti-discrimination law campaign. It lasts very long, and actually, LGBTI community participate in a very, very early stage of the whole campaign. But for Taiwan, I think it's come very quite lately. Uh, we do have a campaign to advocate for anti-discrimination law, like in general, and but I think for LGBTI people community or organization, we start to discuss that. Me and my colleague discuss about that because of during those political campaign from the referendum campaign, we suffered lots of the discrimination attacked from online, offline. That's why we think it's not only, although we do have like gender equity education law, we do have gender equality um, labor law, like labor, school, or in the public space. We do have this kind of act law to regulate, but we don't have an anti-discrimination law to regulate the hate speech or the attack. So that's time we start. So actually, that's also we when we work together. I work with Holly and I ask her many of these questions about how to start a campaign as a LGBTI people and how to collaborate with the other movement like laborers, disabled. I think that's something we are learning and also ongoing. Yeah, because Taiwan's government did propose a draft, but it's still drafting, so they didn't propose that to the parliament, and that's also civil society trying to advocate till now.
Thank you, Joyce. Hodim, do you have a perspective from South Korea on that one?
Actually, it is really big and quite difficult question to answer. But I think we often think of progress of LGBTQ rights like moving step by step from decriminalization and to protection from the discrimination and the recognition of specific rights. But in case of Korea, where there's a lot of pushback from the conservative group, I think that it is not necessarily unfolding that way. Because still there's a lot of stigma and prejudice against LGBTQ people. So whenever we try to introduce the anti-discrimination bill, they all the anti-LGBTQ group, all they say is about it. The law is about marriage equality. It's about same-sex marriage, which is not true, but it's really hard to find breakthrough when the conversation is not about the protection from discrimination. It's about the stigma around homosexuality itself. So from my perspective as an activist working in Korea, so I often feel that campaigning around marriage equality is way easier than campaigning around the anti-discrimination law. And that's one of the reasons behind that few years back, we decided to more focus on marriage equality rather than only focus on introducing anti-discrimination law. Because through the marriage equality campaign, we can share diverse aspects over our queer joy and our real lives. Like there's happiness and sometimes sadness, and there's some discrimination happen, but still we love each other and we decided to live together as a family like that. So for us, marriage equality campaign is not only the goal, but also it is a strategy to move forward LGBTQ rights, um, overall LGBTQ rights. So that's my perspective.
Thank you so much. It also shows the dimension on how hard it is to get a comprehensive anti-discrimination act through, because like you said, Hodem, it's been very much used to be said to that people or religious group want to withhold this act because they say that it will only benefit, for example, LGBTQ plus people, but it's all like an overall anti-discrimination laws. It would also be age and um, ethnic, religious, whatever. So I guess that it's a big act to pass. And again, with some maybe polarized political societies, it may be a little bit extra hard to do that. I would like to move a little bit into the political dimension. So when I discussed this with a good colleague of mine from Taiwan, she expressed that the Taiwanese progress in LGBTQ plus rights has also been from a governmental push, and especially during the DPP at the time. So how important is the government in pushing forward this contra, let's say, a domestic consensus among its voters, because that's often the issues in South Korea. They're too afraid to push away potential voters, and therefore the argument that Ho Rim-yi made earlier, later, later. So maybe Ho-rim, you can start with this one, and we can take Joyce. And please, Yeong, let us know if you have a perspective you would like to share as well.
So the push from the government itself is what is missing parts, especially in Korea. So what we need is a strong commitment from the government side, and needs to secure fundamental rights of LGBTQ people. So I believe that we need to push our government more to for in order for them to act on something related to LGBTQ agendas. And the biggest struggle of in Korea is that sometimes the politicians they overestimate potential pushbacks from the church of the church mobilization in their local constituency. So I don't think that that is not that um, decisive in defining the election result, but still they are over concerning about those like pushbacks from the local churches. So what we need right now is to reframe the current situation, and also to try to present our mobilization in the local communities. So that's one of the things we need to do in near future.
Okay, I can follow. I think in Taiwan, especially in 2019, that's also a year for Taiwan's presidential election and central election. So during that time, that's the first half of that year, and the campaign already started because it's the voting day will be the starting like January in 2020. So it's an election year. And during that time, lots of the um, even DPP lawmaker, they want to run again, and they were afraid. So when we do the trying to lobbying them or do our persuasion, we also face the later sentence, like, oh, I really support you, but in my district, it's very conservative, and you don't know my supporters. They always come to my office and said you shouldn't pass this. It's not good for your election, so you will lose eventually if you vote support a same-sex marriage. So, but I also agree on the political will sometimes is important. Like I said, the previous Prime Minister Su, and during that time, I think President Tsai in some ways she kind of stand in the middle, but eventually she had her campaign like during 2015 when she is running. She did release a video said, "I'm Tsai Ing-wen, I support marriage equality." And that's her like political promise. So when that come to the 2019, if the bill failed, I think that's high pressure for her because she made that promise. So I do think both things are real, like the conservative being over estimate, and also political will is important. But I also want to highlight one thing afterwards. We learned how important it is to participate in the politics afterwards. So in Taiwan, we start to have the political participation campaign, and we have the training section in 2021, 22, and also like recently we still continue have this kind of training section, and um, that's also resonate like we see Korea recently also have the run out campaign to mention about how important LGBTI people participating in politics, and I think that's also a change for politics field. Like the whole field, the atmosphere can be changed. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I think we have to move on to some Q&A. We have been having such interesting discussions. So let's see how many we can squeeze in the last couple of minutes or 10 minutes of this webinar. The first one is from Shonish Sung, and he asked, in both Taiwan and Korea, younger generations seem to be driving new discourses around gender equality, but also experience growing polarization and backlash. How do we move from a gender conflict narrative towards a more constructive conversation? Anyone who wants to have the first word on that one?
Maybe I can start a little bit because I think in Taiwan we see this not only like generation polarization, that's true, but also it's been manipulated, and it's now online. We often see the manipulation as it's kind of an attack because between Taiwan and China, and we see some track of those fake account. They say something, no matter they pretend to be very, very support and aggressive, or they pretend to be very conservative and aggressive, and to make the discussion seem very polarized online. But actually, when you sharing the stories or sharing, see some true articles. It's about struggle. It's about acceptance or not. It's about our daily life. And so I think that's instead of the gender conflict, I think that's a time for all of us to think about how to achieve a real like diverse democratic discussion, no matter online and offline. And when the authoritarian revisit, I think that's being because I think in Taiwan we feel the online attack more often. The I don't know how to describe that in English, but we call it the 认知作战. Like it's attacked. Like control your mind, control the discussion. Yeah. So I tend to see that more not a real conflict, but a situation we need to deal with now for democracy.
Thank you. Yayoung or Hurim, do you have?
So in case of Korea and many other parts of the world, I think those like the frame of gender conflict is not really address the real issue behind the lives of younger generation. So in reality, like many other people, the young people, they feel that they are insecure and their life is unstable. So the problem here is that the the conservative far right people, they try to scapegoating so they make women or LGBTQ people as an easy target for those unstable, like those young men feel that their life condition is totally different with their parent generation or something. So I think to address this challenge is not really simple. And I think we need more like political will to make um, people's, especially the younger people's life more secure and to address the issue like um, unstable job market and also the housing issue and everything. I think those addressing those like fundamental causes of um, insecurity itself, I think it is more important to just reframe the current gender conflict narrative.
It seems we need to have a more secure space to perform our democratic right, which is freedom of speech, to try and have a positive discussion. And I think that's something that no matter what topic you discuss is important for a healthy democracy. So thank you for that. We're running out of time, so I would like to ask one more question for the Q&A before I take the honor of having the final question. So we have one here from Min Jae Kim, and this question is for Joyce. And the question is, Taiwan is often seen as a regional leader on LGBTQ plus rights, while Korea's progress has been more gradual despite similar democratic foundations. In your opinion, what do you think explains the divergence, and what can we learn from the story of Taiwan and each other?
I always think it's a learning path for each other, but not from one side to the other because um like previous year when Korea had the martial law time and the protests in the plaza all the time. Uh, that's also the time in Taiwan. Our political field have a very conf we do have some protests similar to secure the democracy beside the parliament. And actually in Taiwan, there are also many like K-pop fans using the hand lights and dancing or using that card to uh, do something to attack the previous authoritarian party, KMT, to have the cart uh, um, to the building outside, their main building outside, and to have the protest and in a very K-pop fan way. So I think it's just a difference. It's just a difference. Like I mentioned, in Taiwan, we don't have that high Christian population, and I think that's the quite main difference and how to adapt to that kind of political field or cultural field and to have the strategy making difference. So I think that's how we learn from each other all the time. Yeah, so I don't think there will be a like solution for every country that depends on the civil society. And so if I have a suggestion that everyone join holding for their campaign, that's the gathering for civil society will be definitely a very key point for every campaign to break.
Thank you so much. Again, I will take the honor of having the last questions. And this is a question that's very close to me because I always look into what can we do? How can we be constructive? And what can we take away from this webinar? And for me, that pertains to like, how could Taiwan and South Korea cooperate in the future to safeguard LGBTQ plus rights in both nations. So like, where is the best practice opportunities? Where can the civil society goes together? Where can politicians maybe exchange and learn from one another? So, should we take it from an end? Yeong, do you have any perspective that you would like to share on this question?
The good thing is that I feel the Korean government and the National Assembly are always cognizant of international trends. What are our neighboring countries doing? And they always love to do a survey of, the major economies or adjacent economies, which policies that they are doing. And I think it's an opportune thing that Taiwan is geographically so close to Korea, and also it provides such a strong precedent. And we've been noticing some slow but like progress in terms of, for example, the National Assembly Research Service doing a bit more, showing more interest in, let's say, topics of life partnership or anti-discrimination has always been like a pretty big agenda within the National Assembly. So I think what we can try to push for is more of these discourses or global conversations between, let's say, the two countries, parliamentarians coming together. It doesn't have to be the politicians itself. It could be, like, for example, the research institutions associated with these functions that come together to start discussions. I think that's a way to ease into the topic, in a space that is unfortunately still quite conservative, not just in terms of political orientation, but in terms of values.
Thank you so much. Let's go to you, Hurim. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Last few years, there's a lot of like collaboration of LGBTQ advocacy groups within the East Asian countries increase a lot. Like Joyce's the Joyce and our other colleagues in Japan and Rainbow Action Korea, we built the Alliance for Anti-Discrimination and Equality Advocacy a few years back. And we are currently conducting comparative research of the lives in 3 different countries and also comparison of legal and policy landscape like that. And we also have regional network for the groups working on marriage equality in each countries like that. So I think those like platforms, creating more platforms for civil society organizations in other countries to share information, experiences, and also strategy is really important for us to move forward. So within those those spaces, we can create more creative way to change each other's society.
Thank you. And then the last word from you, Joyce.
I want to say, I think from our previous collaboration, we also have another goal, which is to have our narrative because the whole world have so little to know about East Asia. And we probably know about a little bit of South Korea, but a little bit Taiwan, but not as a whole or not recognize the context or how the similarity, the same obstacle we face together and how to have the resources for these kind of obstacle and for our campaign. So especially thanks to the ISCP to have this section, I think that's a start to have more people to recognize or to understand the East Asian context and situation, and then we can discuss about how, as a global civil society, we can work together.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And that's exactly the objective of ICP. We want to be there to understand the different dynamics of the Asian region, both from security to development issues. So we are very grateful for having such esteemed speakers with us today. Again, this webinar has been recorded and will be made available on ISFP's YouTube channel. And furthermore, we will make a webinar report with the key takeaways. So hopefully we can spread the words as well. And maybe one day we can have the pleasure of hosting you in Stockholm to conversations about LGBTQ plus here in Scandinavia. But for now, I want to thank our speakers and our audience for staying with us a little bit longer. And I hope you all had a wonderful day and happy Pride. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Happy
you.
Pride.
Happy
Happy
Pride.
Pride.
Mhm.